Hey guys, Slipshot here with the very first episode of Building Character. It's a video series I'm trying to put together that's meant to help us all kind of think about some new ways to approach character creation and really help us flesh out those concepts that we've all come up with. We'll be discussing the basic pillars of character design and delving into all the little things that you'll want to keep in mind when creating a fully three-dimensional human being, squid monster, alien, whatever your twisted imagination can come up with. And I've read a lot of the concepts on the boards, and I have to say that you guys are not lacking in imagination, so I don't think you'll have any problem whatsoever following along. Having said that, why don't we jump right in and get started? Before we begin, though, let me just stress that there's really no right way to create your character. While we'll be going over various methods throughout the series that I've found helpful to me, please realize that it's not to be taken as a paint-by-numbers guide. Everyone's got a process that works best for them. One guy might start character creation by coming up with this elaborate backstory, and somebody else might have just as much success, coming up with a really awesome superpower and then building a character around it. Having said that, you gotta start somewhere, so I think it's only fitting that our very first episode will deal with, you guessed it, the origin. Now, the origin of a character is a pretty broad topic, so we'll be breaking it down into subsections to make discussing it a little easier. So for today, we'll be sticking to only one aspect of the origin, and that's the character's motivation. Alright, so picture this. You've got this alien that crash lands on Earth. He finds out he's got some crazy powers, and he decides he's going to dress in his pajamas and fight crime. Now, as lame as that sounds, it's actually the basis behind one of the most iconic heroic figures in all of comic lore. That's Superman. So, how do we get from this to this? Well, to answer that, we'll really need to peel back the layers of Superman and really look at why he does what he does. Yes, Superman has layers. Just follow me on this one. I'm going someplace with it. Okay, our boy in blue is the world's finest Boy Scout, but how did he get that way? Was he just born with this great sense of justice? No. It was because he was found by this down-to-earth couple of folks that instilled these core values into him that he grew up to become the poster boy for truth, justice, and the American way. Now, you're probably asking, why are you talking about Superman, Slipshod? No one likes a goody two-shoes. Bring on the Batman. Now, he has got an awesome motivation. It's all dark and moody. Well, hey, I love me some Batman too, but one of the goals of this series is to make you think about character development in a little different way than you're used to. Just because a character isn't morally gray doesn't mean he can't be compelling. If you say, well, my character's girlfriend gets killed, so he puts on a mask and he vows to fight crime in her name. That's a very compelling reason to become a superhero, but why should I care? I mean, I don't know this girl. What made her so special to your character? Why was it that when your average person would simply grieve for their lost love, your character saw no other choice but to become a crime-fighting vigilante? Answering that question is probably one of the most important things you can do for your character, because it humanizes them. Now, get used to that word because I'm going to be using it a ton throughout this series. If you really want to grab someone's attention, then every aspect of your character needs to have that human touch to ground them in reality and make them relatable. Without it, they might as well be emotionless robots flying around curb-stomping cat burglars. I mean, come on, even the Terminator was getting all emotional by the second film.
I know now why you cry. But it's something I can never do.
Okay, back to Soups. Now, on the surface, this guy seems really boring. He's always making the right decision, and doesn't kill anybody, and he's really about as white bread as you can get. So, how do you turn an invincible god into someone you can relate to? Well, you give them a motivation that you can understand on a personal level. You know that scene in every heroic piece of fiction where the bad guy is taunting the hero with having to choose between someone he really cares about and stopping a doomsday device? and how it's always this incredibly agonizing decision, but in the end he always manages to save the girl and stop the bad guy? Well, let's change that situation up a little bit. Instead of one person being in jeopardy, it's everyone in the entire world, every second of every day. And it's not just one doomsday device, but millions. And they don't just come in that little pull the red wire, no the green wire form. They're car accidents, and they're botched robbery attempts, and spousal abuse, and here's Superman in the middle of it all. He is the most powerful force on Earth, and because of this, no one else is better equipped to do the impossible than him. If there's a problem, he's your go-to guy to solve it. And since his parents raised him to believe that all life is sacred and everyone deserves basic human rights, when something goes wrong, he's the one that takes it the hardest. That's what our boy Clark Kent has to deal with every waking moment, knowing that because he's so powerful, he could have succeeded where someone else had failed. He lives with the knowledge that maybe if he'd pushed himself a little harder or flew a little faster, someone else might be alive in the world today. Now, if that doesn't make you want to buy the guy a beer after work, I don't know what will. So, yeah, Superman's invincible, and he can take a bullet to the eyeball without flinching. He can, rub his stomach and pat his head at the same time while whistling Dixie. But he's also got the weight of the world on his shoulders. He was raised to do the right thing, and for him, that means he can never have a moment's peace. He can never stop and take a minute to himself without feeling guilty, because in the back of his mind, he knows there's someone out there that needs him right at that moment. And that's what I mean by looking at character development a little differently. By taking a step back and really looking at what Superman represents, you can see that there's a lot more potential there for intriguing story elements that don't really show themselves at first glance. You come to realize that this character, who, for all intents and purposes, is the greatest hero alive, is also one of the most tragic. So, now I direct the question at you. What's your character's motivation? What makes her stand her ground when everyone else is running away? Remember, it's not always superpowers that make a person extraordinary. Sometimes it's just the simple fact that they decided to stand up for something they believe in. Now, I wanted to take this opportunity to try to answer any questions I may have received. But since this is the first video and you guys haven't sent me anything yet, the pickings are kind of slim. But I did manage to find a good one, thank God, so here we go. Resident Douche asks, how do you come up with a name and appearance for your characters? I really don't have any issues coming up with a backstory, but I always have issues with the appearance and the name of my villains and heroes. Well, Douche, awesome name by the way. Unfortunately, as far as it goes with the appearance of your heroes, that is going to take way too much time. That's probably an episode in and of itself, and we've only got a couple minutes left. So if you just bear with me, we'll put that off for another day, and I promise that we'll devote as much time to it as we possibly can. I've even talked to a couple of my friends in the Peacekeepers, name drop alert, and they are willing to give me some pointers on that, and I will have a huge wealth of information for you, so just hang tight and we'll get to that at a later date. As for the name of your heroes, that is also a tough question, not because I don't know how to answer it, but because there are just so many avenues you can go down that it could take a while. But I don't want to leave you hanging on this one, so I'm going to give you a couple of the methods that I like to use, and maybe they'll work out for you. For me, it really depends on what I want the focus of the character to be. If I want the focus to be on their emotions and how they affect not only their secret identities, but their lives as a hero as well, then I might go for a name that's more abstract. Something that sums up the nature of the character as opposed to their powers. For instance, my character for a time was known for being careless, and he lacked any sense of planning or forethought, and he was generally kind of a wild card. Because of this, he kind of named himself Slipshod, not only to represent who he was, but to remind himself of the character that he wanted to grow into, who he wanted to be. So there's always that option. You also have the option of selecting a name that's more indicative of your character's theme. I like to call this the newspapers named me solution. Try to imagine that your character never named himself and just took to the streets doing their crime-fighting thing. As his reputation grew, the newspapers had to come up with something flashy and original to catch the eye of their readers. So if you took one look at your character and had to describe them to the authorities, how would you do it? This might be where you'd see such names as Batman, Superman, The Thing, Wendigo, names like that. Finally, you could always try a name that reflects your character's powers. This is where a thesaurus comes in handy. That's how a character with ice powers can become something like glacier or permafrost or sleet. It may seem cliche, but there's something to be said for a name that instantly tells people what to expect. The only thing I can say for sure is that you probably don't want to name your character Resident Douche. Unless he's a villain, in which case that could actually turn out to be a really awesome concept for a character. Well, we are just about out of time, so I'd like to end with a quick segment that I like to call Making the Headlines. Each episode, I was going to provide you guys with a link to somebody's character biography, and the creator has asked me to provide this for you guys kind of as a way to get some feedback from everyone. And it'll be your job to give them some constructive criticism, praise, whatever, to help them develop their character more. Remember to remain respectful and try to put some actual thought behind the criticisms. I don't like it, or this guy rocks, doesn't really help. Sure, it's nice to hear, but we're looking for something a little more deep than that. So, without further ado, the character making headlines this week is Flashpoint. So be sure to follow the link that you will find in the post that accompanies this video, and provide as much feedback as you possibly can. And if you'd like your character to make the headlines next video, send me a link to their biography posted here in the alter ego section of the forums. And maybe next time they'll be the one making the headlines. Okay, guys, that is enough for me. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I had a ton of fun making it. If you've got any suggestions for the next topic that we cover, or changes to the format of the show that you might like to see, please send them to me. I'd love to hear them. You can either PM me here on the source forums, or you can send me an email at slipshod@insightbb.com. Anything you want to say, just pop it on over. I promise not to cry too much if you hate my guts and want to make me feel bad. Yeah, please don't do that. Until next time, keep those creative juices flowing, and always leave yourself open to new ideas. Trust me, it builds character. And that's what I mean by looking at character development a little differently. By taking a step back and really looking at what Superman represents, you can see that there's a lot more potential, holy shit, there's a phone call. Finally, you could always try a name that reflects your character's powers. This is where a thesaurus comes in. Thesaurus. I need a thesaurus for another word for thesaurus, so I don't have to use that word anymore, because it's really hard to pronounce.